Welcome to the Wandering Tangent Podcast. I'm BJ. With me is Jeff. This time we're talking about the Star Wars Original Trilogy. So we're talking about Episode 4, A New Hope, Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, and Episode 6, Return of the Jedi.
I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time, BJ. Like, a long time. I was probably born for this moment. Well, that's probably an exaggeration, really, but this is a huge, huge thing to review. So let's just skip into it, I guess.
So
BJ?
You're looking forward to this despite the fact we are watching the extended edition you railed so hard on last episode?
Yeah, we'll talk all about that. The extended edition. All right, okay, so what did you think? What do you think of the Star Wars Original Trilogy? I guess we have to talk about the extended edition, right? But tell me, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, for one thing, it's hardly extended. It's like maybe 5 minutes of new footage and effects over the 3 movies.
Yeah.
But I'll get back to making fun of you about that later. So
Good.
It had been quite some time since I had watched these particular movies, and I quite enjoyed rewatching them. But they are definitely an easier viewing than the prequels.
Yeah.
And I think I tend to like the prequels more than the average person, but still, they're popular to this day, some odd 40 years later for a reason.
For a reason.
40-ish years, I guess. Depends on the movie.
So, I really like the original trilogy. I don't...
You don't say.
Yeah, you don't say. Like, a little bit. I would say that The Empire Strikes Back is within my top 5 favorite films of all time. And all 3 of these movies are in my top 10. And I think the Star Wars trilogy itself just has a special place amongst the clutter inside my soul of different things that I've enjoyed and learned from and just had a good time experiencing. So it's really good. And there are people in this world, BJ, who have never actually seen Star Wars at all. And I even spoke to somebody who was a lot younger than me sometime years ago now, but he said, I've seen Star Wars and I don't really get what the big deal is. Everyone loves it so much. I don't get it. And this is somebody who is less than half our age, so they haven't really experienced it the same way we have. And I think that the extended editions added nothing really great to watch. So if anyone can ever get a chance to watch the unedited version, which I think is hard to find, it was like on DVD 15 years ago. It was released briefly before the extended editions came out. So I think something like that. It's really hard to find the actual cuts, but they are better, and all I could do was think about them over the new
Okay.
edition.
If you're gonna bring this up, we're gonna do this now, I guess. Dude, there's literally like 5 minutes across the 3 movies of stuff added in. Most of it is like background effects. There's a couple of scenes that are kind of added on that don't really add much. You're acting like they totally change everything.
Yeah, I am. Because a lot of the dialogue's changed.
No.
They changed dialogue.
No, they didn't.
A lot of Darth Vader's dialogue
like 3
has changed.
There's like three scenes where dialogue changes. There's the scene where Han talks to Jabba that's on the original. There's the scene in Empire Strikes Back where, okay, I guess we're doing spoilers right away, by the way, I guess. Here we go.
Okay.
There's
Let's just jump into spoilers. Go ahead.
There's the scene where the Emperor talks to Vader. That's changed up a little bit. And then in Return of the Jedi, Vader yells no as he picks up the Emperor and throws him off the cliff. That's like the 3 places they add dialogue.
Nope.
Yes.
No, I'm saying
yes.
no.
Yes.
There's
where else is there?
There's a lot
where
of
else?
Things. I can't go over it all.
You can. Give me at least one other scene.
Those are like the basic things.
You are acting like they changed the whole movie. They don't. Give me evidence. Show me proof. Tell me one other scene.
Okay, hold on a second.
Called out immediately. Has no receipts.
No, come on. Okay.
I guess I'm a little more prepared for this because I do like edit the audio for the past episodes. In this case, I did have to listen to you like go on ad nauseum. Well, not ad nauseum. I'm being a little...
What's ad nauseum? Like, is that a term of some sort?
Ad nauseum means that you just keep on going ad nauseum. You keep going until the other person gets tired of it.
Okay. Okay.
Here,
so let's see.
While you talk, I will look up the official definition for ad nauseum.
Mm-hmm.
Ad nauseum is the Latin phrase that literally means to nausea. Use ad nauseum to describe something that's been repeated or discussed so long that you're sick of hearing about it. So after going back through and editing on for the prequels, you act like this totally changed the movie, and it's not like Lord of the Rings where they add on like hours of footage. There's maybe like 10 minutes on the outside, if we're being totally generous, of stuff added in across 3 movies. And you're acting like they changed the entire trilogy.
Yeah, I am. Okay, obviously
maybe overdoing it a little bit, maybe.
Okay, so you do agree that there's a little bit of an overdoing it somewhere, right?
No.
You don't.
On your part, I'm saying, were most of the changes needed? Probably not. Were most of the changes noticeable? Probably not.
Okay. So your opinion is that basically the basic story's all there, everything is good. It wasn't really big dramatic changes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly what I mean.
Well, I'll state my opinion.
Tell me how it changed the story. Enlighten me.
It doesn't change the story. That's not my issue. The story's all there. There are a lot of subtle changes that are added here and there in order to make it, I guess, better, or to make certain scenes more understandable. Or there's dialogue changes. There's a lot of things added in, and I'm not against everything.
No, wait, I'm calling you out on this. Tell me, outside the 3 things I mentioned before, this added scene with Jabba, the sort of changed dialogue between Emperor and Vader yelling no as he throws the Emperor down the pit in Jedi, what other dialogue was changed? Surely, if it makes such a difference, you can name something beyond those 3.
So, there's dialogue changes for Vader.
Okay, example?
Like when he says, "Alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival," was before he just says, "Bring my shuttle." I want to say a lot of the dialogue was like written over.
That changes what?
I don't see. I'll have to. The thing is, it's like
you're the one saying that changes the plot somehow.
No, I'm not saying it changes the plot.
Yes, you did. You're saying that it changes things. I'm like him stating he's going back to his ship. It's like, oh, I can't believe they did that. And I'm over here like, what?
Okay, I get why you think it's not like a huge thing. Okay, but the thing is Vader's very direct in what he says, and they're changing it into more dialogue to try and make the scene more understandable. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it is. So now, as far as like all the stuff, of all the changes and everything, there's lists online that you can look up, and the listed items, the things that they've changed, it's extensive. It's like it's within the hundreds of different things that they changed. It's a lot. So yeah, so your point, it's not a big deal. And maybe to a lot of people, it won't be a big deal. For a lot of people, this won't be an issue at all. I don't like most of it. If almost all of it, I'm not a fan of. In fact, if you got rid of all of it, I would be probably happier altogether. In fact, that the few things I noticed that I thought were okay were like when they added in eye blinking to the Ewoks. That was all right.
Okay,
But
now
a
see,
lot of the other things I don't like. I don't like the Emperor, and when in like return in The Empire Strikes Back, where the Emperor shows up, and instead of a far away shot of him where it's hard to see his face, he's like big and up close, and you can now see his face.
Up close?
No, it was like
Yes,
he was farther away, and it was
No, he
it wasn't as lighted up. There were more shadows in his face.
Well, that's good to be shot at with McDermott.
Well, whatever it is, I like the old scenes better. I do. Like, I don't think a single thing that they added that, like, okay, let me rephrase. The parts where they take original footage and they change them, none of those I like. None of them. But the parts where they add in a scene, I'm more okay with those. Like if they splice in a scene in where they just have a few extra shots to show that Luke is now walking up onto a platform. Because in the original cut, it just kind of jumped around a little bit in certain spots. I don't think the original cut was bad, though, in the way it jumped around. But they add in a few extra scenes in between to show the transition more. Like when Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi, he's about to meet Luke, and there's a few scenes, extra scenes of him coming through the door and walking from his shuttle and stuff. There's a few more added into there, so you kind of see that transition, but I don't think any of those are really necessary. And yeah, the whole scene they added with Jabba is not necessary. And then Han and Greedo have that shootout, which wasn't really any kind of a real shootout. Han blasted him under the table, which makes a lot more sense because Greedo was pointed right at him.
Now you call this a shootout. They literally added in like 0.5 seconds of special effect.
Yeah. But it's still not a good 0.5 seconds of special effects. The shootout. I don't like it. I don't. I think it was far better at as the original scene.
Okay, so let's come around to kind of the point you were trying to make in the beginning of how you talked to someone much younger as to didn't really get Star Wars.
Yeah.
You were going to make I'm probably putting the words in your mouth here, but you were going to make
Go ahead.
It seemed like you were on the way of making the claim that if they had watched the original cut as someone who had only seen the special edition, that somehow these changes changed the movie so much that it turned off an entire generation, or at least this one person, to Star Wars. As someone who had never seen the original cut.
I honestly think that if this person had seen the original cut, there would have been a bigger chance that they would have liked Star Wars.
You, sir,
and not
are a
disliked
madman.
it. I really think so. And I really think the original cut would have been better because the way that the scenes were put together, there's a lot more flow into them, and just the fundamental things that happen, they're just cooler. They're just more awesome. When Han fires first, it's more awesome. When you first see the Emperor for the first time, it's so much more mysterious and ominous in the original cut. The dialogue is better in the original cut, and all of that.
Okay, counter-argument?
Counter-argument. Fire away.
Okay, and of course this is purely, what's the word? Anecdotal?
Anecdotal? You're making up all these words now.
I might be saying this word wrong, but it's...
Anecdotal?
It's anecdotal, that's the word.
Okay, anecdotal. Anecdotal sounds like a good a word too.
So yes, purely as someone who grew up on the original cut, who had not seen Star Wars in some times, you say there's online list of all the hundred changes they made.
Yeah.
Speaking as someone who hadn't seen the films in quite some time, and grew up on the original cut, much like yourself, I didn't notice hundreds changes. I noticed, there's some stormtroopers added in the background here, or or such. But yeah, you're talking to someone who grew up in the same movies you did,
Mm-hmm.
and the only three big changes I could tell were those three that I mentioned before. Could it be? Now, I'm not saying that your opinion is your opinion, but could
Yeah.
it be that you might be overdoing it a bit?
Okay. Um. Good
Now,
question.
well, of course, I'm not saying it's just a you thing. There is, of course, plenty of people who are terribly upset about changes made. And this is not purely a Star Wars thing. In my experience, if you get a bunch of people of the same fandom together, the first thing they will do is start complaining about what they don't like. I mean, the first Comic-Con I went to, the local Comic-Con, I went to a Godzilla panel,
Yeah.
and and I forget what the panel was supposed to be on, but the moderator had gone sick and couldn't show up, so the rest of the panelists were, but the rest of the panelists were there, but they hadn't had anything planned because they weren't the moderator. So they just kind of wanted to talk with the audience about Godzilla. You know what the first topic of conversation was?
This Godzilla's not like the old Godzilla.
Yeah,
So something like that.
something along those lines. The first topic of conversation was how much everyone hated the 1998 version. Not how much not their love of what brought everyone together in this room, but what they hated about it. So it's not just a you thing, and it sounds like I'm being mad at you, but I'm just kind of
You are. I think there's a little bit of passion in your opinion, BJ, which is good. Let it out.
I mean, it's not really a hill I'm willing to die on, but in past podcasts when I go back and edit the audio, I often think to myself, gee, I wish I would have pushed Jeff harder on this. So this is me starting to push harder on you.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
So
You
so
think
that's
that people are often too critical of something. They get used to something being a certain way, and when it starts to change, that change kind of makes them not able to critically think about the new thing in the right way,
I
in a
think
more open
that
way, right?
I think that when people know something they love has been changed, whether for better or for worse, they will be hypercritical about it.
I agree with that. I agree there is a tendency to be hypercritical, especially if you are a fan of it. Absolutely.
So
I do think that's a phenomenon.
So speaking as someone who grew up on I grew up on Star Wars. Maybe not to the same extent as you did, but you know, I went in, I watched the versions on Disney Plus, knowing that it was going to be the special editions. I know that there were scene changes. I could tell when some of the scenes were changed, but I did not think it was. I did not notice the 100 changes that you say there are lists of.
Yeah, there's a lot, and they've grown over time. So, and you make a good point. Like, a lot of people watch the movie and they may not even notice all of these subtle changes, but there's a lot of them. And the re-recordings of some of Vader's dialogue, and I don't know this for sure, but it sounded like a lot of his dialogue was different. Like it was an older James Earl Jones voice rather than the younger one from the 80s.
Yeah,
And
the only
so,
ones. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I've interrupted.
yeah,
you
so
enough.
so and yeah, so here's the thing, like as much as there is components going on of people overreacting because they love Star Wars and they see it being changed, I think that's just a component. There's another side to it where a lot of these changes legitimately do have issues with them. And I think a lot of the complaints that people made about these changes are valid. There's a lot of there's reasons why that Jabba the Hutt scene was cut originally. And because it doesn't make sense. Greedo's he's trying to take him in, and then he runs into Jabba, and Jabba's like suddenly chill about stuff and he lets him go. I don't think that really makes sense. Jabba's cold-hearted gangster.
If I had to guess, I would assume that the Jabba scene was seemed like the Jabba scene was planned originally, but they couldn't find a way to pull it off, so they added in the Greedo scene because a lot of the information between the two are shared.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, I will agree with you on that part. The Jabba scene was just kind of added in, but I think that's the biggest outlier of stuff that. What am I trying to how to phrase it?
Okay, so
I will agree that adding the Jabba scene was a bad call. It just kind of repeated information redundantly.
Yeah, I don't think it showed the personality of Jabba quite right within that too. The other thing I have a big issue with, if you're ready to move on, would be the one I've mentioned earlier, which is the first introduction to the Emperor. I think the original one was a lot more cold and sinister, and it was a lot more, just his face was different. You could barely even see him. He was far more of a mysterious person behind the scenes telling Vader what to do. And so by the time you see him in Return of the Jedi, the audience has been building up this expectation of him. And that is a good thing to do, where you build up expectation before you show people the Emperor. And as long as the Emperor is in fact sinister when he comes, it pays off. And I think they do an all right job. By the time you get to Return of the Jedi, you see that the Emperor always has a plan. He's always got sinister dialogue. He's always confident in everything he's about to do and everything he thinks is going on. He has no question of himself at all. So I think that the original scenes in Empire Strikes Back with the Emperor are far better. And I don't know all the ins and outs, but I want to say that the dialogue doesn't seem exactly right. I think there's a few things that were wrong, that were different about it. I think he gives up a lot more of the story in it. They changed the dialogue, so he actually reveals a lot more in the wording. So it's not the same. It's not the same, but yeah, I think it's a lesser version of it.
It's not the same dialogue, and I'm looking at pictures right now. I think the lighting's different, but the distance between.
Okay, the distance between them is something that I just seemed different to me. It might be basically the same, but it seems like his face was big and right there, whereas before it was like he was further back and you could see his whole profile, like he was sitting in a chair.
He's maybe a little bit further back, but not by much.
Okay. But, okay, that's my opinion, is that was changed, and I mean, there's a lot of little subtle things once in a while. And look, the heart of the story is still there. But here's the thing, I kind of disagree with fixing movies after they're released. I think that whole thing, I don't think there should be some sort of grand law or that the fans should just outlaw it completely so that it never happens. I just think that it's generally a bad idea after you make a movie to go back, make changes in it, and then release it again because you wanted to fix a few broken things in it. I don't think that's a good idea because there's so many bad movies. Are you going to fix everything that didn't turn out right in films? You're going to go back and fix everything there is to fix? And there's a lot of filmmakers who probably wish they would have done things better, but they don't do that because they had a final product, they released it, and if you go back and change everything, at what point have you just lost everything that was once created? I think that things that are released, that's a work of art. It needs to be preserved the way that it was finished as. And even though people have gone back in and they've fixed a lot of things in this film, I think what people originally worked on it as in the 1970s and 80s has merit to it. And I think that there's actually, this is where your anger can come out if you wish, but I think that there's a fundamental problem with going back and changing the way people did things in the original work. And I all of my woes and all of my complaints would disappear in an instant if only they would just provide the original cuts alongside the new releases. So you could go on to a streaming website, or you could buy the discs and you could get both of them together. That's it. That would be just fine. I have no issue with that.
Okay. I can see where you're coming from, except for one thing in this particular case, because as you phrased it, people went back and they quote unquote fixed the movie. But in this case, it was the original creator who went back and, I believe to his mind, went back and brought the movie closer to his original vision with the tools he had now.
George Lucas wasn't the only one that made this movie, though. Is it Irving Kershner directed Empire Strikes Back, if I'm remembering that correctly? And then there were other people that were involved in the original films. So even though George Lucas owns many of the rights and he's in a way almost like the father of these stories, there's still, the way that they were originally put together was by a group of people that were not really involved in the re-edits because they couldn't be. They were either not alive anymore or had moved on or something. So yeah, I think that it is a problem because these movies are iconic to film culture. They made a huge impact. The film industry was changed forever after these movies came out. It was never the same again. And so to have the original cuts no longer accessible, I mean, you could maybe like dig them out of a yard sale somewhere or find them for an overly expensive price online somewhere, but you can't just go down and buy a brand new copy of Star Wars that was created and minted, in a factory a month ago or 3 months ago, that's like current, and that gives you what you would have seen in 1986 in the movie theater. You don't have that anymore, and I think it's a real tragedy. I think it's a tragedy that that's now gone. And so this person, yes, going back to my original thought, there's this person who says, I don't see what the big deal is. Now, anybody who if you listen to the Beatles today, they're a good band. It's not like listening to the Beatles in 1960, where you had only music from that time to compare it to. So if you listen to the Beatles today, you now compare it to every other piece of music that's been written between 1960 and today. So it's not quite the same experience. So if you watch Star Wars today, it's true that it's not going to be the same experience as it was in the 1980s. But that being said, if somebody came in and changed a few of the Beatles songs and added in a few extra lyrics, and maybe even if it wasn't very much, if it was just like a couple extra measures at the end of the song, and maybe if it was even one of the Beatles who did it, like one of them that's still alive, went in and added a few extra little bit here and there and was like, this is now the song, and the old song wasn't even accessible anymore, I would think that would be a problem too. So that's kind of my argument. I think that it's not a good thing that so many things, and yeah, okay, they're little tiny things, but I think the original one had more charm to it and such a thing. So that guy that said, I don't like Star Wars, part of it is that he's viewing it decades after it came out, and it's not the same experience. But the other part is that he's not really getting the full experience, because the original films do hit the mark better. As far as the characters, as far as building the universe, as far as the look and feel of everything, I think that they actually hit the mark better. Because the changes they add don't really mean very much altogether. In fact, the only change that I don't really care that they added in and it's not a big deal for me, is probably the Ewoks with the eye blinking. They added an eye blinking for the Ewoks. And I guess that's okay, because that's something so minor. There's a few very minor things, but anyway.
Okay, I'm going to force a change here because we spent the last half hour talking about how much you hate the new Star Wars. How about you talk about what you like about?
Okay. All right. Fine. Let's let that
I have
dead discussion die finally.
I've given you a half hour plus however much time you spent on it when we were talking about the prequels. How about you talk about what you like about Star Wars?
Okay.
Let's
not definitely
do that
move
Godzilla
on.
panel at Comic-Con.
Okay. All right. Okay, so what I like about Star Wars. This storyline is awesome. I think what Star Wars did so well at is it combines just fun action scenes with a lot of good like character development and meaningful experiences. Every experience that Luke goes through in these 3 movies, I think the audience very easily can relate to them all, because he feels like he wants more in life from the beginning, yet he's trying to be a good kid and stick with what his uncle tells him to do. And all that whole world is lost to him. So he starts off with this tragedy. He meets new friends, and he wants to make a difference. He loses his mentor, and then
he loses all his mentors.
Pretty
much every parental figure he has dies by the end.
You're right. He loses Obi-Wan. He loses Yoda. His 2 parental figures that he grew up with are lost to him. He has all of that going on. It's a lot of tragedy, but he keeps going. And then amongst it all, he is confronted with the fact that that the thing he idolizes and the thing that he despises most are the same thing. Talk about a world-crushing reality, because Luke had always divided the good things in his life versus the evil things in his life in 2 separate categories. But then he learns in Empire Strikes Back that they're not as divided, but they're actually linked together. In fact, completely. The father he idolized is the same person that he's been trying to fight. And what a crushing thing. Do you actually remember the first time you watched this movie?
I do not.
You do not?
I do not. I do not remember a time I did not know that Vader was Luke's father. That was ingrained. I'm also the youngest in my family, so
everyone told you 100 times before you watched it, right?
Well, I'm sure I had watched it before. I mean, like I'm pretty sure Empire came out before I was born. Empire Strikes Back release. Was that like 82?
Yeah, 80. It was 80, earlier than that, 80.
So yeah, Empire came out before I was born, so I'm sure, like, did Jedi come out before I was born? Return of the Jedi.
I want to say 86, right? Or 83?
Release.
We don't even know.
It was 83, so I was like...
Yeah.
So I was like less than a year old when Jedi came out. So
they're really good movies for being that old.
So yeah, I'm sure my parents had watched it. I'm sure we had watched some legal and some recorded off TV versions of these movies while growing up. So yeah, I probably knew Luke was Vader's son before that like really clicked how much of a shock that was, because that's just how the story went.
Yeah, I don't fully remember, but I have this very distant memory, which might be completely made up, but I remember being something about being very young and seeing that scene in Return of Jedi for the first time, and when Vader says, "No, I am your father," and
you mean Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah, Empire Strikes Back. So when he sees that, I remember seeing that first time, and that's just like crushing. It's a crushing scene.
No offense, but that sounds like a made-up memory.
It probably is. It probably is. There's no way that somebody didn't tell me. And I did watch it when I was young, and the 2 copies we had were recorded off of television because we had a VCR. And I got Return of the Jedi Empire Strikes Back was the only version that we had. And the TV recorded versions were edited because they had to be spliced down to fit within a certain block. So there were scenes in the Empire in Return of the Jedi that I had never seen until I was far later in life, where we finally got a full copy of it. Yeah. But anyway, okay, BJ.
Yes.
Now, we're not talking about any more of the editing stuff, but go ahead. Tell me what you think of these movies.
So, like you said, they strike a good balance. They are swashbuckly.
Swashbuckly? That is a good term. Yeah, that's a great term.
I mean, obviously the New Hope is probably the most quote unquote lighthearted, and I guess you could argue that Empire is probably the most serious, but Return of the Jedi has more serious stuff because I just watched Return of the Jedi last night, and I was watching it, and I remember when I was younger that I didn't really, because during the climax of Return of the Jedi, they have the space battle, they have the battle on Endor, and then they have the scenes in the throne room.
Yeah.
As a little kid, you find the scenes in the throne room to be really boring because they're just talking, and you don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, why are they talking to these guys? Let's go back to the Ewoks.
Yeah. Yes, I totally get why a kid would think that.
It's like I did kind of wonder why, like, well, at the risk of going back down the negativity rabbit hole, why everyone hates Jar Jar, but people are like okay with the Ewoks.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, though?
I don't know. Oh, obviously I just asked, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So I've heard people not like the Ewoks. I've heard a lot of, I mean, most people I meet love all 3 movies, but there are some people who don't like Return of the Jedi because they think the Ewoks are silly, which I don't understand because I think the fact that the Ewoks are so silly is what really helps Return of the Jedi become such a great movie. I love the Ewoks just have this wild personality to them where they're running around. Anything they do it with enthusiasm. Like if they're going to chop off a foot of an AT-AT, they jump on and they start hammering. And everything they do with a lot of gusto. And I like the Ewoks. And yeah, they're little furry teddy bear looking people, but that's fun. It's fun to be in a planet that's different with native populations that are unique, which is a lot like how Flash Gordon was, which is what Star Wars was based on. You would always go to a new place where things were just very different there.
Every time you say Flash Gordon, it's everything I can do to keep myself from going, Flash!
Oh. Yes.
The best part of that movie, well, I guess you're probably talking about like the original, the original, I don't want to...
1936.
Series? This, what's the word I'm looking for? This...
Serial.
Serials, that's it.
Yeah, the original serials. And yeah, those ones.
Not the weird
one with Queen that does the soundtrack to it. That one's a good one too, though. That one's a real... That's a unique one by itself.
That might be another movie that you like. Well, I shouldn't really say because I watched it on TV once when I was super young and wasn't very impressed, but maybe I'd appreciate it more today, but I think that's another movie that you like that I don't.
I don't know if I so much like that one as much. I like the 1936 to 39 one. That's the one I really like. That's the one where the Bugs Bunny cartoons were based on, like Duck Dodgers, the 24th century or something. Those were, anyway. Um, anyway, yeah, Flash Gordon. You'd go to another planet, and there would be native people there, and they would be just a unique population. So the Ewoks are fun. I really like the Ewoks. They must have really spent a lot of time before they ambushed the Empire preparing all those traps. Because they're all kind of like conveniently there. Which I guess in order to make that possible, they would have had to been setting up all those traps for a long time. Like they were trying to ambush the Empire, and the Empire were their enemies long before these, the group of heroes came to Endor. But I like the Ewoks, definitely. And why do people not like Jar Jar, yet they love the Ewoks? That's the question. And that is a good question, because the Ewoks are legitimately funny when they jump around and say yub yub, and they have little gliders that they fly around. I mean, they're fun. I think Jar Jar was just kind of I think the contrast was a little strange, because the characters in the prequels are so serious. There's not a lot of they're not like the heroes in the original trilogy. Those heroes were a lot more fun and real seeming, and they had a lot of banter and good lines where they would kind of like mock the situation or mock each other a little bit. And the prequel people were just so serious. I think Jar Jar just kind of stood out because he was too clownish. And a lot of it just was, I don't know, it's just not funny. How do you explain humor? Some things are just not funny. The comedic timing was wrong or something.
Well,
or really, he was just a Sith Lord, like the conspiracy that I've heard before, that Jar Jar was a Sith. And so
Jar Jar was Darth Plagueis all along.
Yeah. That's why he was at the right place at the right time when Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan showed up on the planet. He was right there. And then he made it possible that he could join their group. And then he infiltrates their group, and then eventually becomes a senator and is the one that says Palpatine's the guy. Let's give him all the power. Yep.
It does make an amusing amount of sense, but and during that tirade, I decided that we're not going back down this rabbit hole, but I will throw you a bone. I do miss while the new ending song makes more sense in the party around the universe scene, I do miss the Ewok party song at the end.
Oh yeah. I am glad that, yes, definitely. The old Ewok party song is fun. That's a party I want to actually go to and dance around a big bonfire. The other one is I guess, it's not as hokey. Maybe that's what they're going for. Everyone thought that the song at the end of Return of the Jedi was hokey. I think in the 1980s and the 1990s, it was too tacky for people, which is why George Lucas probably wanted to get rid of it. He wanted something more like what they remade it to. But I think that it's come around full circle now. And now the old hokey one is more catchy and fun to watch because people don't care about tacky as much.
Well, I think people still care about tacky, but how to phrase this as politely as possible.
Okay.
Corny works in nostalgia, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. With nostalgia has a way of making corny things far more fun because it doesn't have to be anything else once it gets fixated into the nostalgia category. It becomes good in its own way. Yeah. So, next question. What made these movies good? There's obviously a lot of movies have been made. Every movie wants to be as successful as Star Wars. They want 40 years of a devout group of fans. They want people to be hungry for more content. And Star Wars, they want to sell lots of little toys and figurines. And Star Wars has made a lot of money and has been a huge success story. until probably the last few years. But what made this successful, BJ?
Well, as much as we dunk on the sequel trilogy, they still made boatloads of money with it. So we can't say they weren't successful, but...
Okay. So the prequels were successful, right? They made basically enough money.
Well, I think all of them will... Oh. There
Well,
are
did episode
things...
9 lose money?
I don't think it lost money. I think it just didn't make as much as they were expecting.
Okay.
So...
I know the Han Solo movie lost money, right? Probably. Anyway, they weren't as popular as people would expect them to be. We can probably safely say that.
There's things we're going to say about the sequels, but we might... Box office, that's the word I'm looking for. I mean, looking at it, it made over $1 billion. It was talking about episode 9, made over $1 billion. It was the third highest grossing film of the year, behind Avengers Endgame and The Lion King. Live action one, I guess. I never actually...
So it seems like people did go and see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just we're nerds, so we're plugged into the anti-nerd culture, as I stated before.
Yeah.
Fandoms love to talk about what they don't like, but we're not going to go back down that path. We'll save all our negativity for the next episode.
Exactly.
Which is why I'm trying to get us to talk about stuff we like today, because next time there's going to be less of that.
Yeah.
I fear. Who knows? Maybe the world will go crazy. Me and you will actually like episode 9.
That'll be interesting.
There is a non-zero chance.
Non-zero chance.
Non-zero chance.
0.00001% chance.
Non-zero.
The odds are 3,220.
Don't tell me the odds.
Can I just say that rewatching these, I think I've grown a greater appreciation for the character C-3PO. He really does help tie a lot of the scenes together. He'll often have a transitionary line where he'll say, "Exciting is hardly the word I would use," and then they transition to the next scene. He's very much central to making the movie flow, and he has a lot of comic relief banter that he will do once in a while. Him and R2 will argue over things, and R2-D2, it's weird. Like, when you hear R2-D2, do you think you know what he's trying to say?
I mean,
what do you think?
I think the tones get the general point across, but it's not like I can tell word for word what he's saying.
Exactly. And I think they took tones that people often use in phrases as they're talking, and they worked that into his tone. So when he's beeping, it's almost like you kind of know what he's generally saying. And maybe not all the time, because sometimes they have to talk for him, and C-3PO has to say what he's trying to say. There are moments like that, but it's weird how you kind of can get a gist of what he's saying. It's almost like Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo spoke English words, but I don't know. Never mind. That's a bad example. Scratch that.
I will say that something I noticed this time around that maybe I didn't catch when I was younger is that apparently the Wookie language is a very expressive one. Because Chewbacca would go, "Roar," and Han's like, "What do you mean Luke's trying to rescue me? He can't even save himself." "Roar, Jedi Knight."
Yeah.
Apparently,
that's a lot of.
It's like an entire sentence.
It's a very compact language. They have 40,000 different tones, so all you hear is a growl, but it's like one of the 40,000 different tones that means a particular sentence. Who knows how Wookiee language works?
But apparently it's very expressive.
It apparently is. It's so expressive you could have just a scene of Wookiees growling for about 5 or 6 minutes, and it would make perfect sense.
Except not, because that happens in the Star Wars Holiday Special, and it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if that's the punch you were going for, and I just ruined the joke, but...
We can't talk about the holiday special. It'll bring up too many negative emotions after an already turbulent podcast. Anyway, it's like we had our own little Comic-Con debate. Anyway.
I was going to say, we changed the subject. Remember,
we changed the subject. We're happy now.
We're happy now.
This is the good times.
Don't turn to the dark side, Jeff. Don't let the hate flow through you.
Sometimes it feels good to let the hate flow, though, BJ. To hate on things. Okay. Yes. So what I think made Star Wars so awesome and just do an incredibly good job of striking the right chord with the fans and making them go crazy. I think what it did well is that most people don't realize that there's two sides. Now I'm going to go philosophical, which I know you'll have things to say about. But I think there's like two sides to people. There's the, like with Freudian logic, there's the id and the ego. The id wants just everything the same way a child would want it. I want to be fed. I want to be happy. I want to have all sorts of good emotions. I just want basic things. That's the id. But the ego is different. It needs to be fed differently. It needs an idea. It needs something more sophisticated. It needs to have something where it can believe in itself. It's much more intricate. And I think good movies do a good job with stuff that feeds both sides of the brain. And my example for that is that in Star Wars, you have these really great battle scenes where it's like pew pew and, you know, stormtroopers everywhere, gotta run away. And oh look, we blew up those TIE fighters. Now we're safe again. There's a lot of things like that where it gets your adrenaline going and it feeds the id. And then you have a scene where you have Obi-Wan teaching Luke about the Force. And you have scenes where you have Luke and Leia on an Ewok balcony and they're talking about just their, you know, Leia's mother, and all this character development unfolds. And then you have the struggle where Luke is struggling against evil and he finds out that it's really, he has to defeat the dark side inside of him and not just fight Darth Vader, but it's a complicated struggle where he has to choose between the dark side and the light side of the Force. So that's what I think it did well, is that it does all the action-y stuff, which feeds the id, and then it does all the other stuff that helps feed the ego. And the two get balanced out. It's not like you do a whole lot of one and little of the other, but you actually go back and forth. And what Star Wars is, it's the journey of Luke and how he learns and he triumphs over the difficulties of his past and he becomes a Jedi, and how he is just fraught with so many difficult choices to make, and he has to overcome his own weaknesses, and he has a lot of learning experiences from, you know, Yoda and Obi-Wan, and he has all that plus good experiences with his friends. So all of those great things help feed the ego in a sense. Anyway, does that make any sense?
I'm not gonna lie, I zoned out for a good chunk of that.
In other words, my dialogue was not balanced and people zoned out.
It's like
what is he talking about?
It's like you started talking about ids and egos. I'm like, monster from the id. I'm sure your point. The parts that broke through were very well made, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sorry.
You zoned out, and your id monster like got up and got a snack and came back. We're like,
Oh,
For those
man.
who didn't
The
see
crow
the
would have been
very
much happier if instead of destroying everything, the monsters from the it's like, man, I just want like some chips or something.
you wake up and there's like snacks all over you
It's like,
everywhere.
oh,
It's like, what was my id monster doing? It got into the cheesecake.
why,
Oh
why
no, we were saving that.
why can't my monster clean up after itself?
That'd be useful if you're like your id monster got up and like mowed the lawn, washed the dishes. Like, what the heck? My house is clean.
That's not a very id thing to do, but
No, it's not. But maybe your id is like fed up with you. It was like, well, fine. I guess I'll do this again. He doesn't do anything. I have to do all this work yet again. The id is going to need to talk to the therapist instead of the conscious person. The id monster.
oh,
Yeah. Goodness. A lot of people are probably lost now because they haven't listened to our first podcast, which was all about Forbidden Planet. Because none of this makes any sense since we're talking about Star Wars. Oh, gosh.
well,
Okay, I gotta make you angry again at some point. I'm trying to pick a good moment to do that.
well, don't do it yet because
Oh, okay.
So, I think what makes Star Wars work is that I don't want to call it a simple story, but it does follow a very traditional like story arc.
Yeah.
And by like traditional, I mean like a story arc that spans most of mankind. Like go look up the hero cycle and there's like archaeological stuff about how stories throughout human cultures will generally follow the same arc. And I forget if Lucas planned it that way or it just turned out Star Wars was just like a very good example of it. But Star Wars is very archetypical of it.
Yes. There's a really good book by Joseph Campbell, I believe.
Yeah, Campbell.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I zoned out on you because I was looking that up.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fair. But yeah, and I have a copy of the book. I'm about 1 foot away from it right now. And every time I try to read it, I fall asleep really quickly because it is a dense book with a lot of content in it. But George Lucas somehow read that book and it certainly helped him to be successful. At least that's the narrative that you often hear about it. But I from what I understand, the hero's journey is like the hero starts off and he is somehow put onto a quest or a journey by a wise person of some sort or something like that. There's a lot of flexibility to it. But then he goes on this journey, he usually gets a friend, but then he confronts the evil that he's against. He gets harmed or defeated, and then he falls into tragedy of some kind. And then at his lowest moment, his or her lowest moment, they then learn some great truth or gain some great power or something new comes about where they get what they need to then go back and defeat the evil. And that's the basic skeletal structure of it. In the most simplified version, which I only really understand simple things, generally speaking.
Yeah, looking at the Wikipedia page, Campbell originally had like 18 steps, but later people broke it down to 12. So there's the ordinary world, call to adventure, refusal of the call, meeting the mentor, crossing the first threshold, test allies and enemies, approach the innermost cave, the ordeal, reward, the road back, the resurrection, and the return. So, yeah. In some cases, Star Wars does that very literally.
Yeah. And it works. Yeah. Because people like it. They love the storyline. I think you feel for Luke and Han and Leia and all the things that happen to them. Like everything. Like when they're in Jabba's palace and you don't. And they finally free Han, but then Jabba's hiding behind the curtain. I mean, things happen, like bad things happen to these characters, and you feel for them. It's a really interesting storyline, really is, and I think that there's something too, that when Luke confronts evil, he actually has to not just confront the Emperor. He's got to defeat all of the bad things that are also inside himself, because he's got to be able to choose between whether he'll live according to the way the Sith live, or if he'll be a Jedi. He has to make that decision inside of him, and it's not an easy decision. You think throughout the show that it's an easy thing. It's an easy choice. He just has to choose good. But then once he gets into the battle against evil, and he gets tempted by Vader, which is, come be with your father, the person you idolize, and rule the galaxy. Restore order to the galaxy, which is exactly what Anakin wanted. He wanted to save the galaxy. He wanted that power in order to bring order to it. So Luke was hugely tempted, and then when he confronts the Emperor, it's not so easy to keep your anger at bay, because the Emperor, he knows how to push your buttons to get you angry. So yeah, it's a real struggle of a thing, and I think the audience really enjoyed the struggle.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. You said you want to make me angry. Go ahead and
Yeah.
make me angry.
Okay, so I need to make an amendment to our last recording, which was about the prequels. And in there, we went on this...
Too late for that. I'm not going back and editing it again.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, you gave me this really good quote where people were talking about that line that says, only the Sith deal with absolutes. Like, please no, not this one again. I just want to
go again.
Just like C-3PO. Yes. Here we go again.
Here we go again. I have a bad feeling about this.
Okay, so I didn't quite explain my point of view, probably because I honestly needed more time to think about it, because that was a really good point. Like, is it in fact... And when Obi-Wan says only the Sith deal in absolute, isn't that also a statement of the Jedi believing in an absolute? And I think that comes down to what you define an absolute to be. Because
I gave you the definition of the absolute.
Yes, you did. You did a good job. You did a very good job. But to me, an absolute is not the same thing as something that you wholeheartedly believe in. It's a little different, because it's like if you believe in gravity is a constant. It's always there. You might say even that you believe gravity is an absolute, but the reality is, if the universe ever changed and how it worked, then gravity wouldn't be an absolute. So I think how you come to the conclusion makes a big difference, and I think that's what the line was trying to say. Maybe it needed to be worded a little more better, but I think that's what it was trying to say, is that the Jedi believe what they believe because they came to that conclusion, and if something changed, they would come to another conclusion. But in an absolute, at least in the definition they're using in the movie, from my point of view, an absolute is something
from a certain point of view.
From a certain point of view, an absolute is something that's just always there. You don't change it. You can't change it. It's an absolute. So like when Anakin says, the Senate is slow at fixing problems. They need a strong leader that can just go in and do the right thing. When he's saying that, to him, that's an absolute, because he doesn't allow another scenario. He doesn't allow more input. And if the circumstances changed, that opinion is so strong within him, it becomes an absolute. So to me, it's like a great scientist might believe in gravity, but the reality is, as soon as something changes, that scientist is going to change their belief in order to fit in how the universe works. And somebody who has an absolute belief about gravity, they may not ever change because to them it's an absolute. I think it's a different mindset. Do you come to you can come to a strong conclusion about something and be completely committed to that conclusion, but why are you committed to it? Is it because you have analyzed everything that you could and that's the right answer? Or is it because you depend on that answer to be the way it is? That's a difference between an absolute and not. I think the Sith, they deal in absolutes because they need to believe certain things. They need to believe that they are the ones that are the smartest in the universe, that are the most powerful, that are the ones destined to rule and to be the toughest ones. The idea that other people could be better leaders than them, could be better at using the Force for good, for a more useful purpose, is something that they don't accept because it's an absolute that the dark side is good, is the best side to be on, and the good side is not. And even like the reason why the Jedi believe that the dark side's bad and the good side is good is because they came to that conclusion. Not because it's an absolute, but because they have come to that conclusion and they will change their opinion over time to match what they believe the Force is supposed to be and what it can be used for. And they believe in the good because of how it's good, because it's the one that creates balance and creates sustainment and not destruction. Whereas, does that make sense?
So, I see where you're coming from. I think where I can get real nerdy here, folks. I think the weakness in your argument is that you are coming at it from how to phrase it, from ideally how the Jedi should be, rather than how they are sort of portrayed in the movie. Because
and I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Because I think I brought up something that I saw on a different video, is that at 2 points, Darth Sidious and Mace Windu tell Anakin the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. He's too dangerous to be left alive.
Yeah.
Or so in my opinion, and I did do a little research on this, make sure I am including the wrong thing, but in my opinion and some other opinions I've seen online, when Obi-Wan says that, it's not a...
Or Mace Windu says that, yeah.
I'm talking about a different thing now.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I'm talking about when Obi-Wan says sort of the line that kicked this whole thing off, that only Sith deal in absolutes. It's not this roundabout logical thing that you're trying to get at, but rather that it's showing that Jedi are no longer holding up to their ideal. They say that he says that only Sith deal in absolutes without even knowing that he is that by saying that statement in that way, he has bypassed his own logic.
So you think that the Jedi are in fact making mistakes?
Yes.
Yeah. And I do think the Jedi can make mistakes because, yeah, they could make mistake. It could be that their philosophy is good. The good side of the Force is good when it is understood and followed. But they may not be flawless in their endeavor to follow it. So there may be times where they get into the mindset of in thinking of things in terms of absolutes. They might get into that, but I think that they generally don't. And I think when
they very much do, because when they go to arrest Palpatine, they say, well, I guess we're going to have to take over the Senate for a little while. There's
because
no
that's
talk
the
about...
only way for them to counter Palpatine, because he's the Chancellor.
Well, they're already going to go arrest Palpatine. They're going to remove him from power and place themselves in power, albeit temporarily, but they are taking absolute control like Palpatine did, or at least they plan to, for at least a little while.
But the difference is why they're doing it. The steps that it's not that they believe like the Palpatine believes that it's an absolute that he should rule the galaxy. Whereas the Jedi, they have weighed the options and came to the conclusion based upon what they think is the right thing to do. It's not I would disagree that I don't think it's an absolute idea in their head, but because you can come to a conclusion without it being an absolute idea. I think there's a difference between being completely and totally sold on a particular idea and having confidence in it and believing because you have looked into it, that's got to be the right answer, and an absolute belief. Because the difference is when it becomes an absolute belief, that's when your ego gets so incredibly entrenched in it that you can't accept any other options and you become unchangeable. Whereas the Jedi, I don't think went that far. Now, from the outside looking in, it does look exactly like what you're saying, that it looks very bad politically for the Jedi to take control of the Senate in order to get rid of the Chancellor. From the outside, that looks terrible. But from the Jedi's point of view, they know how dangerous Palpatine is, and that the Republic's going to turn into the Galactic Empire unless they stop it. So, yeah. But you raised good points. I don't know. Keep going. Go ahead. You disagree, probably, right?
Oh, yeah, because, I mean, semantics aside, only Sith Dill in absolutes is pretty absolute. Only, so, exclusively, Sith Dill in absolutes.
Yeah. So if the Sith... If the Jedi don't deal in absolutes, how can they even make the statement in the first place? Right?
Well, I mean, we can argue intent behind it all day long. In fact, I think we have.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But on its face, it's a hypocritical statement.
Okay, I disagree. And we'll just kind of we can just leave it at that. I don't think it's hypocritical because they...
I thought we were just leaving it at that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how to leave it at that. That's one of my absolute beliefs, is to go on and on forever. Okay, leave it at that. You're right. Okay. Okay. Whew. Why do you think in the cantina they don't like the droids? Your droids, they can't be in here. They'll have to wait outside.
I know you're going to this, so you might as well go. You're about to wax philosophical again.
Well, maybe not as much as you might think, but... Well, I think because there's kind of a new thing happening right now, which is that artificial intelligence, people say, will change everything in the future. And in Star Wars... I don't think I've fully appreciated how smart I think Lucas was when he came up with droids and how they interact with people. Because they're very clever. They know how to get things done. They can use machines far better than a human can. But at the same time, they sometimes don't do the things that people want them to do. So I almost think that in the Star Wars universe, this is my own idea. So I sort of think that
we're not gonna go off another hour on the Jeff Fan. We just can't do that this time.
That's true. So briefly, I would say I think people are annoyed with droids because they're not a novelty anymore. It's not like they're a new invention. They've been around for a while, and they realize that they often cause trouble because they don't do exactly what you want them to do all the time. And I wonder, with artificial intelligence coming out and people loving it so much, that the same thing will happen, where people they'll love the solutions that they give, but after a while they'll get tired of it because the solutions will never exactly be precisely what they want. They'll always be a little bit off. And so they'll just get annoyed, and they'll want to have a space where they don't have an android And even characters like Han is so annoyed with C-3PO. And Lando Calrissian, he's annoyed by droids. And Luke is the only one who has patience for droids. Anyway.
So after you go off on this big thing, I'm like, well, what if it's just because it's like a crowded room and droids aren't going to be paying customers?
That could be it too. They just don't want them in there because they don't buy drinks.
I would say in years past, I was expecting that to go in a very different direction because in years past you had waxed on a very different reason, but I guess you're not going to go there. So.
Nah.
Okay.
Nope. I will not let my brain rampage just right at this moment over yet another thing.
He says as we're like 90 minutes in. No, okay, we're not like 90. We're only 80 minutes into this.
Okay. There's another big one though. Unless you want to say something, go ahead.
No, go ahead. This is
okay. Here's my next. I'm ready for my next bombshell of a thing that's probably overanalyzed.
I've gone a whole 13 episodes of making a whole 13 episodes of saying how excited I am to hear you go off finally about Star Wars. So go ahead.
You know, it's only Star Wars. I'm not like this about every movie, right? Like it's usually, I mean, Star Wars is just something I've thought too much about for too long. But okay, so probably the most iconic and best scene that I love the most out of these entire Star Wars films, all of them together, comes down to the scene of in Empire Strikes Back where Luke is with Yoda. His ship is stuck in the swamp. And so Yoda simply says, well, this is a learning moment. Get your ship out. And Luke's like, that's big. I only move rocks. You know, I moved 3 rocks. That was a lot for me. 3 rocks. You want me to get the ship out of the swamp? And Yoda says, yeah, get the ship out. I'm obviously paraphrasing here a lot. And he's like, it's too big. That's impossible. And Yoda says it's only different in your mind. The Force does not care about all this, about size and about what is hard and what is easy. None of that matters in the Force. Is me again paraphrasing. And so he tries and he fails at it. And then Yoda comes up and he's obviously it's a failed teaching moment. Luke has not done what he needed to do to solve the problem and to learn from the problem. So Yoda, being a great teacher, decides this is the moment where he's going to have to help Luke with a little bit of faith in the Force, a little bit of trust in it. And so he lifts the ship right out of the swamp. And it's this great scene with great music. And then Luke says, oh, I don't believe it. And Yoda says, that is why you fail. You don't believe in the Force as much as you might think. So anyway, that's really good. And I like that scene. And the reason why I like it so much is because I think that learning in general needs to have a lot of emotional experiences in order for people to get hooked onto something. Like if you might, because Luke liked the Force, but he never fully understood it until he tried to push his limits with it, failed, but then saw how Yoda showed him there was no limits to it. It was an experience where he was able to see the real power of it. But I don't think it would have worked as well if Luke had not tried in the first place. I think if Luke hadn't have gone up and made his first attempt to try to lift it out and failed, it wouldn't have meant as much when Yoda succeeded because he would have understood how hard it was. And I sort of feel like with learning that happens a lot. People need to like try and do things, and even if it doesn't work out and they fail at it, I think the experience of failing can be part of the process. So when they do see success, they're able to understand it. But But I mean, also with that, I think that I think learning is a kind of an emotional thing where you need to have a eureka moment where you realize that what you're learning matters and makes a difference. Like when you might hate fishing, but then the moment you finally, after hours and hours of being forced to fish, you finally catch a fish and you reel it in, and that experience then becomes a catalyst for you to then start being interested in fishing and like fishing. And that's a great example because I actually don't like fishing in general, but I think that sometimes when it's hard to do something, when you finally get that eureka moment where it's like it clicks for you and you realize that something is important to learn, and it's something you have to like have an emotional experience about. That's why I like that scene, because Luke has always wanted to be a Jedi, but until that moment did he not fully understand the Force, and he realized what the Force was, and it was an emotional experience of where he finally got to see of what the potential was and what his potential needed to be. I probably don't do it justice, but it's a good scene. And even throwing all that weird gobbledygook aside, it's just fun. It's Yoda being the wise one who shows his student how much he needs to learn. And it's a great scene, I think.
Yeah. Don't know what to add to that, but yeah, it's a good scene.
Okay.
I don't know if you were expecting to like start a thought-provoking conversation, but no, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, good enough.
Yeah.
Good enough.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Ugh. Star Wars. The good news is, after this and one more recording, we won't need to talk about Star Wars. We could get like a movie that doesn't have anything really to say much of. It's just a simple film.
I'm sure after this you will never talk about Star Wars again.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. There's times where I don't go a long time without talking about Star Wars.
May I make a little bit of a confession right now?
Yes. Please
totally off topic, but I'm a little sad because back when we started recording this almost 90 minutes ago, I started a timer on my phone for when you first mentioned Star Trek, and you haven't mentioned Star Trek once. I was the one time I set a timer so I can be like, and there we are. X amount mentioned in the podcast. Jeff mentioned Star Trek, and you just never did. I've been waiting for it this whole time.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're on the original trilogy, which is my favorite 3 of all the films. So, I don't know. Yeah. There's so much to talk about with Star Wars. Okay, which is better? This is the ultimate nerd question. Like, which do you like more, Star Wars or Star Trek? And with you, it's obviously Star Wars, I would say.
I mean, sure, but I would argue that they scratch very different itches.
Okay.
Or at least the good Star Trek stuff will scratch different itch.
Yeah, well, not all Star Trek is good. I just said those words, yes. There is some of it that's like, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. There's the odd-numbered movies.
No comment. And
I know one of these days you're gonna get back at me by making me watch one of those. Like, don't know which one I'd rather watch less: The Search for Spock, or what's the 5th one? Is that Undiscovered Country, or is that The Final Frontier? I think it's The Final Frontier.
The Final Frontier is number 5. Yeah, I think we're going to need a little bit of time first. We're going to need a Godzilla film or something in between all those. Something to get back to basics. But, yeah, so, not everything relates to Star Trek, BJ. Obviously, I didn't bring it up.
That one time I set a timer for it. There's been times I was going to bring up Star Trek, and I'm like, no, I don't want to instigate the conversation because I want Jeff to be the one that starts it.
Okay.
There's
You be the one that brings it up first? Why not?
because it would have been snarky, like back when you were ranting about back when you were ranting out the seeds added in. I was gonna say something. I was gonna say something along the lines of so would you have liked it better if they had panned around the Star Destroyer for 5 minutes?
Possibly. The Star Destroyer is cool looking.
What if, as they get pulled into the Death Star, they circle around her for like 10 minutes, and every so often they cut to they cut to the cockpit of the Falcon, and just emote at the Death Star. And that's a reference to our podcast on Star Trek Motion Picture. We're just hitting all the classics. At this point, something came up, so we had to take a quick break in recording. So that's why the following conversation is a bit disjointed.
Okay, what were you saying? Repeat what you were saying so I can carry on.
I was making fun about Star Trek Motion Picture again.
Oh, making fun of that movie.
Yes.
Yeah, because it has long panning shots.
The best movie ever. Empire Strikes Back is number 3, but Star Trek Motion Picture might be number 1.
Yeah. And or then what is number 2? Oh, I can't remember now. I think it might be the Hudsucker Proxy.
I was going to say, didn't you say it was The Burbs? But then again, you said The Burbs is only Tom Hanks' best movie.
Yeah, The Burbs is not that high, but it is a good film. In my brain, it's a good film.
But the Hudsucker Proxy is number 2.
The Hudsucker Proxy is a real favorite of mine.
I do not have a ranked movie list, but every time you bring up yours, I'm just shocked, and there's just shock and awe.
Shock and awe. I like weird things.
You apparently like weird things. Well, I guess it depends on what your definition of weird is, because I like weird things too, but it's weird in a very different way.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It all depends on your point of view.
Say, I'm still plotting a couple of things on what could possibly be the movie I like that you don't, but I feel like I would have to rewatch them first to make sure I actually still like them.
Because nostalgia gets in the way.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, BJ, what is your favorite scene from all 3 movies? Let's do one scene from each movie. Your favorite.
One scene from each movie. At the risk of making you angry at me, I don't know there's really like a super standout scene in The New Hope.
Okay, we'll skip on. Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back. You're asking me to rank things, and I'm terrible at ranking things.
Well, just, you don't have to rank them. Just one thing that stands out that you like.
Yeah, BJ, just name the best scene. That's not ranking it.
I'm altering the deal.
Alter it further.
Probably when the walker gets tied up and falls. You know, somehow that walker exploded rather well. Everything exploded.
Everything explodes.
They couldn't blow it up very well, but the moment it got tripped and collapsed, then another shot comes in and kabow.
Oh,
it's blown up. Something must have happened to it when it fell.
Maybe the armor's not as hard on top.
Something, I don't know.
I mean, Luke does get one to spontaneously combust with like a single hand grenade.
Yeah. I would theorize that it explodes the volatile explosive munitions inside or something. So
the volatile munitions of laser.
Yeah, laser something.
I don't know, man.
It could have been a really good grenade too.
It's really good.
Yeah, it's small, but this is Star Wars.
I'm like,
it's like a thermal detonator.
Yeah, man, you can do that in like Battlefront.
Yeah.
Or like Rogue Squadron.
Rogue Squadron. That was a fun game, Rogue Squadron.
In the time, it was a fun game. I'm sure if we tried to go back to now, it would just kind of suck.
Yeah. It was
I
a
mean,
real
I think
achievement to eventually finally get
I,
the tow cable to work and
I
to
mean,
trip
I
the
think our
water.
time in Rogue Squadron was fun because we turned on all the cheat codes.
Uh,
I can't remember. In Battlefront, could you take out the walkers, or could you not? Because that was like the Empire spawn point.
I know you could blow them up. I think you could blow them up with the Y-wings. You could like bomb them. There was different missions. It wasn't just about a mission on Hoth. There were other ones where you had walkers. I think you could take down the walkers.
Could you use the tow cables on them in Battlefront? I can't remember.
I think there was a level where you use the tow cables on them and you fly in circles.
Like there definitely was in Rogue Squadron because every time in Rogue Squadron you'd get a level where you'd have used the land speeder like, oh, it's gonna be like 25 AT-ATs you have to tie up.
Yeah. We're just gonna have you just use 25 tow cables and just kind of like tie up the whole herd.
It's a land speeder mission. That means all you're gonna do is tie up AT-ATs. Oh, and by the way, everything on the map's gonna be shooting at you at the same time. So
And if you don't do it fast enough, suddenly you'll lose the level.
you don't do it fast enough, you die. If you get shot like twice, you die. So hope you have the infinite life code turned on because you have to fly in a straight line to line up the tow cable.
Yep. And if you fly too far out of the circle, it'll break.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Great game.
The things that video games make us do.
Like I said, I think we put up with it because we had the cheat codes, so we had infinite lives. Like, how many lives did Rogue Fun start with? Like 3?
Yeah,
Something like that.
something like that, yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so, but you like Return of the Jedi best out of the 3, right?
I guess.
Yeah, you're not much of a ranking person. You're
I'm
showing
not.
that. You just look
there's-
at what it is and enjoy certain things, but yeah,
Well,
I get that.
I was gonna say, like to a certain extent, it's all the same story. But then again, I guess if you ask him about like some other movie trilogies like Lord of the Rings, I have an answer for that.
Oh,
but
okay.
I don't know.
I think all 3 movies are obviously good, and that they support each other really well as a trilogy. The Empire Strikes Back is always a huge, big one for me as far as my favorite to watch, but I don't think I would just love that one and not love the other ones. I mean, all 3 of them are good. And if you just took away one movie, the other 2 would be less. You kind of have... they come as a wonderful sandwich of bread, meat, and bread. And
Maybe not the best analogy.
maybe I'm just hungry, but a trilogy is kind of like that, where you have one type of movie, and then you have the middle movie that's a little bit different, and then you have the third one where you kind of like end where you started. It's like a sandwich, right? Bread, the fixings, but I don't know. But the first one's happy, second one's tragic, and the third one is kind of like both. It's like happy but also tragic. It's like a mixture of the two. But the Ewoks are fun. Yeah. Do you think do you think that whole Ewok battle was like plausible? Do you think a group of spears and arrows could really take on a group of stormtroopers?
I mean, they do kind of show that doesn't all go the Ewoks' way, and there is some, like you mentioned a while ago, there are some very conveniently placed traps during the later part of the battle where they suddenly have to take care of like all the ATSTs.
Yeah. So it's almost like they had traps there and they had set them up because they were planning to take on these big machines. But those traps weren't really right next to the where the main battle was. So they happened later on. Conveniently when the battle's ending and the good guys are now winning.
Like some traps they could probably set up without like the Empire noticing, but like how this primitive culture that like doesn't even really show like I mean, I guess they like build up in the trees, so they must have some sort of tools. But how do they cut down like 20 trees
with their stone
load them
axes
at the top of the hill without like the Empire noticing?
That's a good question. Maybe the Empire just doesn't care. They hardly even notice that the Ewoks are there. It's not a big deal to them.
It did make me think that I need to go back and watch Mandalorian again, because I only watched season 1 of Mandalorian. That was a while ago, so if I want to watch season 2, I need to start over. But there's at least one episode of Mandalorian where they do a very good job of making the AT-ST scary.
Yeah. The Chicken Walker, as it is called. Yeah, I know that episode. That storyline in that episode is very similar to the Magnificent Seven that we just reviewed not long ago. Because it's a village. It's a village that they have to go in and help the village against a group of bandits. Same, like, basic thing. Defend the village.
I would say that's not like exactly a rare plot point, but okay.
No, well, you're right. It's not a rare plot point at all.
It's not quite the same as the Magnificent Seven or the Seven Samurai. It's not quite the same. Sure. We'll just... What other movies can we randomly bring up that we've talked about already?
Yeah. I think the point is that you don't
need
Where
are we going to find the link of Godzilla versus King Kong?
Yeah, where are we going to find
Godzilla,
that?
I should say.
That would be great to like make a movie where you take all of these things.
When Vader picks up the Emperor, that's like when King Kong picks up Godzilla.
Okay, then Darth Vader versus Godzilla, who would win?
We're not doing this.
In other words,
stop.
The answer is no. We're not going there.
The answer is no. Oh boy. Are you running out of
I think Darth Vader would be like, yeah, do not talk about how the Force is puny. Your battle station is insignificant compared to the power of the Force. Except for Godzilla. Godzilla would win.
Turns out Godzilla was a Jedi all this time.
Now that would be a formidable force. Godzilla is a Jedi. He comes out with Jedi robes. He even has a lightsaber he made.
Well, his thumb breaks kind of like a lightsaber.
Yeah.
But since we're going off on random things now,
I think Mothra would just be like, nuh-uh, and just turn and go back into space or wherever he's from.
I will say that after watching the prequels and parts of this one, I will say that Jedi robes look very comfy.
Yeah, I would agree. I know if you walk around with them in regular society, it's kind of a taboo, or people would know everything there is to know about you the moment they saw you, but they do look really comfy.
Don't they?
Yeah. They look like nicely loose fit and not too cold. You have that nice cloak on. And yeah, very comfy.
Okay. Oh, Ari. Is there anything else you want to say? Because now we're just slamming all the tangents in at the end.
Okay. It's a good set of movies. And watch them. Enjoy them. They're good. Even with the additions in them. The additions don't help.
Stop.
But watch it anyway. Watch it anyway.
I'm not letting you go down that route again.
Yep. Yeah, just watch them as
Do not go into that cave. Do not take your weapons with you.
Remember the cave. Remember your failure at the cave.
Remember your failure at the cave. Jeff goes down to the cave and it's just a box set of the Star Wars Special Edition. He takes his lightsaber, cuts it open, that shows his face inside.
They destroyed it. Somehow the Star Wars Special Edition is in fact the battle internally that I have with myself, where I'm constantly adding more scenes onto my previous memory and making everything different. I don't know.
Kind of like the childhood stories we disagree about when we talked about the Burbs.
I know.
There's another tie-in.
Apparently everything we remember from the past is
the tie-in
different.
episode to different podcasts, but here we are. I think we've matched 5 so far. I just need to figure out another 8 or something.
Yeah.
Of course, you know what this means, right?
No, I don't.
This means that we have to watch the sequel trilogy now.
Oh. No, that's impossible.
No!
Search your feelings. You know it to be true. No! I searched my feelings and ow, that hurts.
I don't want to.
Oh, those feelings hurt when I search them. Ow.
I mean, of course we will talk about more in a couple of weeks. I don't remember, what's the first one? The Force Awakens being that bad. It was just...
The Force hits the snooze button and sleeps another 10 minutes.
It was just very much...
Force Awakens.
It was just very much A New Hope again. But I remember thinking, what's episode 8, The Last Jedi? That one's not good. I have... Now, after rewatching the original trilogy again, I have things to say about that, which I will want to say more in 2 weeks.
Very good. In 2 weeks, let's have you go on long rants, and I'll just sit here and go like, okay, okay.
Yeah. I'm
eventually,
sure
he will stop. He will stop eventually. I just gotta keep going.
Yes, I'm sure that's exactly what's going to happen when you watch the Star Wars movies you don't like. Considering you ranted for a half hour about maybe 5 minutes of footage. It's going to be like a 5-hour episode. And then, in The Rise of Skywalker or whatever. So yeah, join us next time as we discuss about how much we love the sequel trilogy. Including the first time that either of us watched episode 9. The Rise of Skywalker. Even though I think we're both pretty spoiled about what happens in it, right?
To some extent.
We have both looked up. We have both heard or read some summaries to some effect. Yes.
Whatever sanity we have left, it'll be gone. That's what I foresee. I foresee that as the future.
Well, I guess as is proper, we are ending the middle chapter of the Star Wars Trilogy of podcasts on a down note. We had to find some way to make the dark middle chapter, I guess.
Some way.
Okay, so last call. Anything to say?
I thought they smelled bad on the outside. I don't know. Out of all the Star Wars quotes that we ever quoted as kids, that was probably the one that we liked the most.
I was going to say, maybe what makes a movie good is how quotable it is, but then again, I think we've agreed in the past that while Temple of Doom is probably was the weakest Indiana Jones movie, it's also the most quotable.
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways the funnest to watch. I think I stepped on fortune cookies. Crunch, crunch.
We are
going
to die. As a super versatile line. Somehow.
Indiana Jones. That's another group of movies we should watch and review someday.
Well, except then we'd have to watch... Well... What's your thoughts on Crystal Skull?
Not good. Need I say more?
What's your thought on the fact there's a 5th Indiana Jones movie coming out?
Hopeful. Maybe. There's hope. He finds an archaeological artifact in a retirement home.
Isn't there like some Bruce Campbell movie where like
about Elvis?
Yeah.
It's
I've never actually seen it, but I've had it described to me.
Bubba like Hootat or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Bubba Hotep or something like that.
That is the funniest storyline.
I've never actually seen it, but I've heard it described.
I've seen I think I've seen it all the way through, but it is hilariously funny. Such a funny story.
It seems like
it's about Elvis.
It seems like it'd be in the vein of like Army of Darkness or something like that.
I think it's made by the same director, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
Or at least somebody inspired by the same stuff. But it's funny. But anyway. Yes, making a movie about Elvis with Egyptian stuff woven into it, and also like, myth, like turning Elvis into a bunch of lore like, about Elvis. It's really like, funny.
So is it like actually Elvis, or is it like an Elvis impersonator?
You really want me to spoil it?
Maybe not.
Oh, okay.
Join us X episodes down the line where we talk about Bubba Hotep. I don't know.
It's a good one. You should see it sometime. It's good.
Well, if you recommend it, I'm not sure anymore.
Okay. Stay away from it.
Okay. I know that's just like 3 times already, but have anything else to say?
If I did, it would only lead us further to the dark side.
Okay, so before
give in to our anger. There's been a little bit of a dark side to this podcast. I didn't know that. I think this has been good because between all of my rants and your rants, I think we might have made some amount of progress in that we have figured out how close we get to the dark side and have hopefully gotten it out of us.
I'm just laughing because I don't know if it carried over into the audio that got recorded on your end. That you like started talking and then there was like a click and you went silent for like 5 seconds. So I had to know if you like got disconnected. What happened?
Oh.
because you're like mid speech about going down dark side. It's like click. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired. I'm just laughing at anything now. So
yeah, I think we're both exhausted. That's true.
So we can either end this now or talk for about 5 more minutes and make this a 2-hour episode.
2-hour episode. Do we get like a gold star if we go over 2 hours? We get like a discount on oxygen or something. What grand war? I know. You get 7 more breaths of air. What kind of thing that we would get that that is meaningless and we would get it anyway?
You're going to like a medical supply store. It's like, here's my podcast. It's over 2 hours. Like, oh, you get half off your next oxygen tank.
We're running a special right now.
It's special. If you talk
2 oxygen tanks for a 2-hour podcast about Star Wars.
You're talking about Star Wars for 2 hours. You get an oxygen tank. Best be 1 episode.
If you had 3 hours, you get a CPAP machine along with it.
Okay, we're stopping there.
That's it.
Okay, I'm BJ. With me was Jeff. Join us next time.
Yeah, do join us next time because we do get better eventually.
Except maybe not next time because we're gonna.
Oh yeah, next time is gonna be a real.
You thought this was
you thought this was bad.
You thought this was the Dark Middle chapter. Join us next time as we watch the Ewok Adventure. The Caravan of Courage.
The Caravan of Courage.
No, we're not watching those. We're watching the sequel trilogy, which, as you may have noticed, we have opinions about already. Mm-hmm. Even the one we haven't watched yet. I'm BJ. With me was Jeff. Have a good day.
So long.
No.
No.